This woman almost fainted due to low blood sugar. A kind security guard came to help her get a sweet drink. But the next second, the pregnant woman took out a poisoned phone. Waiting until she received the sweet drink, the Russian ambassador to South Korea also unexpectedly died. Just as the pregnant woman was about to successfully retreat, a security guard burst into the elevator. A woman going down stopped her. The two immediately fought in the narrow elevator. The guard couldn't get her gun, so she had to pull out a knife from her shoe. She stabbed the woman in the stomach, but the result was empty. It turned out the woman was pretending to be pregnant. Just like that, the woman grabbed the dagger to counterattack and killed the security guard. But due to the security guard's intervention, the elevator returned to the banquet hall. The girl had no choice but to pick up the gun and directly open fire. She fired while quickly hiding in the ballroom, then quickly asked the retreat team to find a way to pick her up. On the other side, her teammate, who was monitoring from a distance, guided her to leave from the staff staircase in the corner of the room. So the woman intentionally shot and broke the glass. Waiting for the security guards to be distracted, she quickly retreated along the route Hood had indicated. This girl's name is Rebecca, an assassin agent for the American private intelligence organization CODIS. This time she was ordered by the organization to Seoul, South Korea, to assassinate the Russian ambassador to South Korea, Mika Pop. Rebecca just didn't expect that she was also being targeted by others. On the other side, Hood was still coordinating the retreat vehicle. Outside the room, a Korean man's knocking was suddenly heard. Hood had told him many times that he had the wrong room, but the man outside kept knocking. The moment Hood stood up, the man kicked the door open. He first snatched the computer and put it up high, then turned to deal with Hood. In just a few moves, Hood was knocked unconscious on the floor by the man. After seeing the evacuation point, the man used his finger to press the button to send a retreat signal to Rebecca and her team. Next, he immediately took his belongings and rushed to the target. Then, he set up a trap using a fake baby to block a car on the road that the retreat vehicle was sure to pass through. Just like that, Rebecca's teammates, completely unprepared, fell into his trap. Then, the man drove to the retreat point and waited for Rebecca to get in the car. The result was that the previous collision had scratched the car's headlights. Rebecca noticed this and turned to flee, simultaneously drawing her gun and firing at the car. The gunshots attracted the attention of the Korean patrol police. The mission failed, and the man had no choice but to drive away. In fact, the man had no ill intentions towards Rebecca because he was David, her father. According to public information, he had died 9 years ago, and he took these actions only to make Rebecca leave the CADIS organization. But unexpectedly, the plan still failed. On the other hand, the leader of the CADIS organization, Juno, learned privately from her son, Oliver, that the operation in Seoul had some issues. Although Mika K-pop was dead, the retreat was obstructed, and someone had ambushed them. Fortunately, the local police did not investigate any connection to CADIS. It turned out that the CADIS organization was in the intelligence business, but Juno, as an American, sold military intelligence of American allies to the Russian intelligence agency. Planning this assassination was to prevent the CIA from investigating, but unexpected incidents still occurred. Juno's expression became grim, and she told her son to quickly send people to find Rebecca. It's just that Oliver was a little jealous because his mother always valued Rebecca more than himself. She had shot down a Venezuelan military plane, and everyone still thought the cause was an engine malfunction. Juno cared about Rebecca because she was the most valuable asset in the organization. Then, Juno asked if they had investigated who the troublemaker behind it was. Oliver shook his head and said that there were no precise clues yet, only that the other party came alone and seemed to know all their actions by heart. Juno's eyes turned cold, and she told her son to kill this person at any cost. At the same time, David skillfully removed all traces he had left in the car, then abandoned it in the parking lot. David had previously promised his current wife that if he couldn't bring their eldest daughter back this time, he wouldn't get involved again. After all, David had struggled to fake his death, escape, and build a new life, but David still couldn't get on the train to return. So he called his current wife, Yunju. "We agreed to only take one risk." "I know, but she needs me," Yunju reminded him. "If they find out, they'll kill you and all of us." David quickly assured his wife that he would never let that happen. Then he told Yunju to quickly pack her bags and go to a safe house to take shelter. "Leave by train tomorrow. Remember not to leave any traceable items." After saying that, he hung up the phone. On the other hand, after escaping, Rebecca proactively called Juno, asking what was going on. As a result, Juno pushed the problem back to her. In her words, she even suspected that Rebecca, who was responsible for the mission, had leaked information, leading to the retreat team being ambushed. Juno's words immediately hurt Rebecca deeply because in the years after losing her father, she had called Juno, who treated her best, a new family member, and now she was being suspected by the person she trusted most. Rebecca's voice trembled slightly as she said that she would absolutely not do such a thing. Juno realized her words were a bit harsh, so she quickly said that Rebecca could find the troublemaker herself. At the same time, David returned to the car, wrote the specific coordinates on a card, and then directly smashed the car window. The car immediately let out a piercing alarm. Finally, David took a taxi to Seoul to find his good friend Choi's small shop. He was the one who had previously helped David erase his tracks and create a new identity. Choi saw David's anxious expression and asked, "Has something happened?" David directly stated his intentions and hoped Choi would help him one more time. "For all these years, I thought she was safe, and now I know she's working for Juno. This is nothing short of a death sentence. I can't sit by anymore." Seeing David's determined attitude, Choi had no choice but to agree. However, even to prepare the documents in the shortest time, it will take at least 2 days. On the other hand, Rebecca found the note with the coordinates that David had intentionally left. She immediately ordered it to be tracked. And at this moment, David had also begun preparing to fight, waiting for Rebecca to lead people there. Very quickly, Rebecca and a few others arrived. Unfortunately, David had already set up a trap. Rebecca was attracted by the familiar cake on the table. Just as she was bewildered, a loud explosion suddenly rang out. Her team immediately lost 2 members, leaving only her and Hood. When the 2 went upstairs through the window, they saw the mastermind's back fleeing. They quickly chased after him and then split up to search. Hood went a step ahead to confront David, but he was still not his opponent, so he was quickly knocked unconscious on the floor with a gun stock. Then David continued to follow the plan to lure the enemy deeper, finally reaching the moment of confronting his daughter. As soon as Rebecca entered the door, she saw a photo of herself and her father. The next second, her living father stood before her. Rebecca, with an incredulous look, questioned David. "If you weren't dead, why didn't you ask about me all these years?" David saw that Rebecca was still so wary, so he quickly put down his gun and said that he knew Rebecca needed an explanation, but now the 2 of them needed to leave quickly. As a result, Rebecca continued to be agitated, completely unable to listen. David had no choice but to explain that everything he did was to protect her. "Now, you sacrifice your daughter and can come with me." David thought his daughter's attitude had softened, but the next second, Rebecca attacked him and knocked him unconscious. Then, she called Juno and questioned her whether she had intentionally sent her to deal with David. Juno was also so confused that her face went blank. She didn't even know David was alive. If she had known, she would have sent people to kill him long ago. Now, learning from Rebecca that David was still alive, Juno's heart immediately churned, and she immediately secretly sent a message to someone. The next second, Rebecca saw David showing signs of waking up, so she immediately hung up the phone. David was not at all angry that his daughter had knocked him unconscious. After all, not appearing for 9 years was truly reprehensible.
No!
Rebecca stepped forward to look and found that Hood had received an order from Juno to act this way. Her heart was shaken. What does she want to do? The next day, the father and daughter went to a convenience store to replenish food. Rebecca took the opportunity to ask her father where he wanted to take her. David's plan was to first take Rebecca to Busan to get a new passport, then depart for another country and never return. Rebecca, after hearing this, did not immediately agree, intentionally causing trouble for David and then making an excuse to go to the restroom. In reality, she called Juno a second time to ask her why she wanted to kill David. Her answer was, "David is too dangerous. Can you bring me back?" Of course, there's always a place for you here. It's great to hear that, even if it's not true. David, seeing that his daughter had been in the restroom for too long, hurriedly rushed in to check and found that the restroom window was open. He immediately intended to drive after her, but then discovered that Rebecca had not left at all. She just wanted to make David worried. After that, the father and daughter set off for Busan, but not long after, they encountered a traffic police roadblock. In fact, Juno had tracked the location of the father and daughter and sent bribed police officers to stop them. The police, without even checking, forcefully demanded David and Rebecca to get out of the car. However, the 2 would not meekly allow themselves to be arrested. Both of them acted almost simultaneously, quickly subduing the traffic police. Fortunately, David managed to stop Rebecca from killing the young police officer and only shot him in the arm. The father and daughter quickly retreated and hijacked a car in the opposite lane. David drove against traffic and successfully escaped the encirclement. Juno received news that the operation had failed again. Her expression became grim. Oliver, seeing this, seemed curious and asked, "David once co-founded the organization with my mother, so why is he now being hunted?" But Juno did not answer her son's question. Next, Oliver found David's current address, but the house was under the name of a woman named Yunju. She was the daughter of a famous businessman who owned a transportation company in Seoul. 7 years ago, Yunju married a man named Young Di-ho. Juno immediately realized this was David's fake identity. To eliminate this great threat, Juno sought out a professional Korean assassin nicknamed Gun, hiring him at a high price to find and eliminate David. Meanwhile, David wasn't stupid enough to be tracked so quickly. It could only be due to an insider. He took Rebecca to a friend's secret shop and tricked her into drinking rice wine laced with a sedative. When Rebecca was fast asleep, David searched her and found the phone Rebecca had used to contact Juno. At the same time, Juno had just arrived at the branch when Senator Dawson proactively sought her out. He initially wanted to meet K-pop, but the other party had been assassinated before they could meet. He contacted Russian security agencies to provide important US intelligence. "I want to know who is behind this." Dawson didn't know the mastermind was right in front of him. Juno calmly lied that if there was valuable information, she would report it immediately, so Dawson didn't suspect her at all. Rebecca didn't wake up until evening and realized that her contact with Juno had been exposed. She admitted to calling Juno twice. David asked what she had said. Rebecca said she just wanted to talk to Juno because David had suddenly appeared without asking anything, destroying her relationship with the organization and dragging her into this dangerous adventure. What exactly is it for? David immediately told Rebecca that it was all for love, and everything he did was to protect her. But Rebecca didn't think so. Is becoming an orphan good for me? David then explained that 9 years ago, he and his team were hired to hunt down Hugo Maldonado and his terrorist organization. But they discovered that David and Rebecca's detailed information had appeared on the terrorist organization's computer. This organization was extremely ruthless and never overlooked any target. They would use all means to achieve their goals. Before David could return home to find his daughter, his team was ambushed. All members except him died. David's eyes reddened and his voice became hoarse as he spoke. He knew that the terrorist organization would not let him and his daughter go, so he could only choose to fake his death so that Rebecca could grow up safely. But in fact, this decision also caused David extreme pain. He missed his daughter every day, never truly letting go. So after 9 years, he risked exposing his identity to appear before Rebecca. But just then, Yunju called David to say that she was being followed by 2 men. David told her to find a hiding place, and he would be right there. Is that a woman? That's Dad's wife. David didn't want Rebecca to risk following him, but she still wanted to go with her father to the train station. At this moment, many of Juno's people were already there, just waiting for David to walk into the trap. David dealt with some of the enemies and then lured the rest into a safe passage to give Yunju time to get on the train. The father and daughter continued to deal with the enemies and quickly dispatched them. When David went down the stairs, he ran into Gun, who immediately lunged to attack. David couldn't dodge in time and was slashed in the stomach, then kicked down the stairs. At the critical moment, Rebecca arrived in time to help. Then, both got on the train and met Yunju. But Rebecca was heartbroken to discover that David had another young daughter. He neglected me all these years, but gave all his love to another daughter. This thought immediately ignited strong anger and jealousy in Rebecca. David anxiously called Choi, saying he needed a fake passport as soon as possible. David also asked him to send the items because he couldn't pick them up himself. Choi had no choice but to agree and wrote down the time and location, then pasted it on the computer. On the other hand, Rebecca became even angrier when she learned the little girl was 7 years old. He said he missed me every day, but after faking his death for just 2 years, he remarried and had a child. So when confronting Yunju, Rebecca had a distinctly hostile attitude in her words. Yunju tried to calm things down, but Rebecca remained cold. You replaced me and my dead mother with a Korean replica. I didn't replace anyone. I tried every way to find you. Rebecca didn't want to hear David speak anymore. She told David to figure out a way to escape because given Juno's personality, she would definitely send people to block them at the next station. And indeed, that was the case. Juno sent an army, including the professional assassin Gun, to the next station. However, David also had his own methods. He waited for the right moment to pull the emergency stop button, then brought everyone off the train early and escaped before Juno's people received the news and arrived. Juno, using the map, deduced that they wanted to go to the nearby truck stop to retreat, so she immediately ordered Gun to pursue them. At this moment, David had indeed flagged down a truck heading to Busan and begged the driver for a ride. But a little later, Gun and his men caught up. Seeing bloody handprints on the truck's bed, He immediately ordered his subordinates to stop the truck. But when it was opened, there was no one inside. This was a deliberately created trace to mislead them. Just like that, David's group reached a safe house in Busan. On another front, Dawson approached Juno again and handed her a document, which contained a photo of Oliver and a classmate. Dawson told Juno that the young man next to her son was a CIA agent who had been trained in the US. His family owns property in Gangnam District, but he was killed in the US some time ago. I know your son has a close relationship with a CIA agent. What are you hiding? Dawson clearly suspected Oliver's involvement in the young man's murder. Dawson also mentioned that the FBI had begun monitoring Oliver. Juno feigned panic and asked what she should do. Dawson suggested that Juno allow him to speak with Oliver. After Dawson left, Juno immediately sought out her useless son. Furthermore, that young man was indeed killed by him. A slight oversight by Oliver could very likely expose their weakness to the CIA. But Oliver was dissatisfied. Isn't it because we sold intelligence to the Russians through K-pop? Even if the organization is disbanded, it's not my fault. However, Oliver then offered to handle this himself. He didn't want to live his whole life in his mother's shadow. At the same time, Gun followed a lead and found Choi's shop. The two immediately engaged in a fierce fight. But Choi, who had been injured and retired, was no match for Gun, who was in his prime. Although Choi was very stubborn and would rather die than reveal David's whereabouts, the note he had pasted on the computer still provided new clues for Gun. He immediately called Juno, saying that David was currently in Busan and seemed to be meeting a contact tonight to get his passport and leave South Korea. Juno thought for a moment and decided to give her son a chance to train. She would send her son and another team to assist Gun and also asked him to protect her son. Back to Rebecca, after a not-so-good day together, she finally exploded. She accused David of being selfish because he said that abandoning her was originally to protect her, but then turned around and had another daughter and gave all his fatherly love to her. David wanted to explain, but there wasn't much time left. They needed to get their passports and leave South Korea as soon as possible. So, he just said sorry and hurried to the meeting point to get the passports. At the same time, Juno thought for a long time and finally proactively approached Dawson, placing Rebecca's document in front of him and saying that this was the person who murdered K-pop. Along with all the evidence, a former member of the organization has left the organization. Her father appeared and helped her escape. Juno also said that she and her son knew nothing about the CIA agent being killed. Dawson did not pursue the matter further, apparently believing her. On another front, David arrived at the meeting place but couldn't contact Choi. A bad premonition arose in his heart, and just as he was about to leave, he discovered Juno's people appearing in the crowd. Seeing enemies appearing both in front and behind, he slipped into a small alley. However, all his actions were clearly seen by Gun from above, but he didn't want to stir the grass and startle the snake, and just let David go home to catch them all in one swoop. David arrived home, unable to even cut his younger daughter's birthday cake. Everyone quickly packed their belongings and rushed to the pier. Very soon, Gun discovered that David and his family were no longer in the house. He then led his subordinates to the port. David initially wanted to go to the pier and then to Seoul for shelter, but before he could depart, the enemy had already chased them to the port. There's no time to go now, he told Yinju to quickly take their daughter and hide, while he and Rebecca would stop the enemy together. Rebecca acted first to give David time to make simple bombs. Then David calculated the time and retreated with his daughter. When the enemies tried to pursue, they were blown into the air by exploding oil barrels. But a few people were still unaffected. Gun ordered them to split into multiple directions. He will deal with David, and Rebecca will be handled by Oliver. Just like that, David confronted Gun again, and the two fought fiercely, unable to determine a winner for a while. But the next second, David's leg was wrapped in a rope, and Gun took advantage of that to lower the ship's anchor into the water. As a result, David was trapped. Rebecca's situation was much better. Oliver was only good at talking. In reality, he was no match for her. He was toyed with by Rebecca's gun until he was dizzy. Finally, Oliver ran out of bullets first and had no choice but to hastily flee. Rebecca comfortably chased after him, but he couldn't escape even if he had wings. Just like that, Oliver was intercepted and knocked down by David. David angrily pulled out his gun and pointed it at him. Oliver, scared, exposed his mother's past. Last year, that incident in the Philippines was my mother's fault. To the furious David, he quickly explained that Juno had betrayed David to Maldonado and also provided information about David's and his family's profiles to them. The clear purpose was to eliminate David to seize sole power of the organization. Not long after, Juno received a call from her son, but the person speaking was David. "You stole my daughter and my life." Now it's David's turn to settle the score with her. The next day, Juno's people were sent to clean up the bodies. Fortunately, Gunn was still alive. At this moment, Juno was furious and ordered her subordinates to track down David's whereabouts, focusing on his in-laws. But her subordinate reported that the old couple had someone backing them, and specific information could not be investigated for the time being. At the same time, David and the others had dinner with his in-laws. Although his father-in-law was not very fond of this son-in-law, because his daughter loved David, he reluctantly accepted him. After a while, David finally opened up and asked his father-in-law for help. He needed unofficial visas and a safe route to enter Japan, including his entire in-law family. They need to get on a cargo ship to Fukuoka in 2 days. Only then can everyone be safe. His father-in-law was initially very angry, but out of respect for his daughter, he still agreed to help arrange everything. On another front, Juno was extremely worried about her son, so she proactively proposed a deal. As long as David spares her son, she will let David and his family go. The scene shifted to Dawson. In fact, he didn't believe Juno's words. It was clear that Rebecca was a pawn she was pushing out to take the blame. "Juno was once my student. I taught her espionage skills. I have a hunch she's using what she learned against her own country." After David heard Juno's voicemail, an idea sparked in his mind. He then went to the imprisoned Oliver, wanting to sow discord between the mother and son. David said that he had tried to propose a deal to exchange his life for the safety of himself and his family. But Juno flatly refused. After saying that, David played a doctored recording of Juno with added divisive words. The naive Oliver actually believed David, so he told David that their organization had once sold intelligence to Russia, and K-pop was the intermediary for the transaction, and Juno sent Rebecca to kill him to prevent this from being exposed. In addition, some time ago, the CIA sent a Korean agent to approach Oliver. Because he found concrete evidence, Oliver was forced to kill the other party. When it was light, David understood everything and also informed Rebecca of the news. Currently, Senator Dawson is also investigating this matter. He is currently in South Korea, which means that as long as the two of them submit the necessary evidence to him, the US will naturally take action against Juno. Therefore, David and Rebecca decided to return to Seoul one more time. David told Yunju to take their daughter with the in-laws to a safe place first. He and Rebecca drove back to Seoul that night. Their first target was Dawson's assistant. After finding an opportunity to copy the data on the assistant's phone, they smoothly obtained Dawson's recent schedule. Then the two went to the food street where he would be going. After Dawson arrived, David directly called him, saying that he had a method to overthrow Juno. "The two of you need to meet privately to talk." Dawson thought for a moment and agreed. Then, David found an opportunity to create chaos and successfully escaped the security personnel to meet Dawson. As soon as David arrived, he immediately said that he could provide evidence of Juno's crimes, but he needed immunity for himself and his daughter. Dawson thought carefully and finally agreed to his conditions. Then David intentionally released Oliver not far away. "Your mother won't forgive you easily. What you told me, she'll know sooner or later." Clearly, David was still trying to sow discord between the mother and son. Juno's subordinates also investigated that Dawson had lost contact for 1 minute and Oliver's location was returned near that street. Just as he said this, Oliver returned to the organization. Although her son returned safely, David's small tricks still made Juno a little suspicious. The next day, David and Rebecca began monitoring the mother and son. They found that Juno even specially made breakfast for her son. This showed that the mother-son affection seemed very deep. But soon after, Juno couldn't help but ask Oliver what he had told David. Oliver initially wanted to lie, but as a mother, Juno always understood her son best, immediately seeing through his lie. Oliver reluctantly told the truth. Juno's expression changed slightly after hearing her son's words, saying it was nothing, but her attitude immediately became cold. Finally, David and Rebecca saw Juno leave her son's apartment. Next, they needed to do something to make Oliver continue to suspect his mother. Then, the two took the opportunity to sneak into the building's surveillance room. They deleted the surveillance footage of their infiltration. Rebecca even connected to the building's internal signal source and successfully obtained all real-time surveillance images. Thus, relying on the surveillance data, they evaded the guards and successfully entered Oliver's room. David immediately began installing surveillance equipment, while Rebecca was responsible for keeping watch, but they didn't expect Oliver to return shortly after going out. The two could only speed up, fortunately managing to retreat from the room before Oliver opened the door. Because David intentionally worked very carelessly, Oliver quickly discovered the tracking device behind the wall. His face turned pale, and he immediately assumed that his mother had sent someone to install it. David met Dawson again because he suspected that Juno had an insider close to Dawson, so he suggested that Dawson set a trap to lure the person out. Dawson then faked an internal confidential document, the content of which stated that a secret witness would expose Juno and the organization. Indeed, the insider quickly revealed this document to Juno. Dawson witnessed this firsthand, and Juno also fell into David's trap, believing that her son was the witness. So she ordered her subordinates to monitor all of her son's actions. But Rebecca told David that this level was not enough for Oliver to completely betray his mother. They had to target his psychological weakness. Oliver is timid, weak, and afraid of death. This point can be fully exploited by the two of them. As long as they make Oliver feel that his mother wants to kill him, he will definitely run to find Dawson. The two acted immediately. In the evening, when the security guard took Oliver home, they did not forget to send a work report message to Juno. But in Oliver's eyes, it had a different meaning. He almost thought his mother wanted to deal with him, so he hastily took out a knife for self-defense. But unexpectedly, he saw his mother in the house. Juno said she had a gift for him. Oliver opened the box and saw a bow and arrow set inside. "You'll return to England tonight." "What? The organization and everything here are not suitable for you." But Oliver didn't want to. He felt that he had suffered a lot for the organization. So how could he be told to leave just like that? Oliver was also waiting to inherit the organization's business, so he couldn't possibly resign himself to leaving like that. But Juno said that during the day, she had contacted her ex-husband and discussed Oliver going to work with his father. As a result, Oliver resisted even more fiercely, even taking the car keys and angrily leaving. Juno hastily sent people to follow her son closely to avoid any further incidents. When Rebecca found out about this news, she immediately informed David that the operation could begin. Then David knocked out the security guard and drove after Oliver's car himself. Soon after, Rebecca also joined the pursuit. The two worked together to gradually drive Oliver onto the route they had planned in advance. Seeing that the time was ripe, David stopped chasing the car. Instead, he used a prearranged device to remotely cut off the power to Oliver's car. As soon as Oliver got out of the car, David directly detonated the bomb. Oliver saw this scene and became even more convinced that his mother wanted to deal with him. Then, he hastily called Dawson and agreed to cooperate with all investigations. Dawson agreed to grant immunity and would provide 24/7 protection. Just like that, Oliver sided with Dawson. Very soon after, Dawson called to inform David. Even if Oliver only told a little truth, it's enough for them to accuse Juno and her organization. Soon we won't have to run anymore. We can finally be together as a family. Today is a day to celebrate. And the two also took out wine to celebrate. But very quickly, Rebecca talked about not having much education. All she learned were killing skills, but she really liked these things. David tried to correct his daughter, saying that Juno had turned her into her personal weapon and said, "You still have a chance to return to the right path." Rebecca immediately shook her head, saying that she had actively sought her out at the time, and everything was voluntary. "Juno didn't force me at all." David was at a loss for a moment. Just then, the surveillance screen showed Juno's people approaching. The number of enemies was too large. The two simply couldn't resist. They had to figure out a way to retreat. Then the two split up and fled, agreeing to meet at the riverside. Unexpectedly, just when they thought they had escaped, Gunn and his men intercepted Rebecca. When David caught up, his daughter had already been taken away. David tried to chase after them on his motorcycle, but even though he almost died, he still couldn't catch up. The next day, Rebecca met Juno again. But before Juno could gloat for too long, Rebecca told her, "Your son has run to Dawson as a witness. Just wait for your son to expose you and go to jail, and then this organization will also collapse." Juno's expression changed, and she quickly ran out to confirm the information. When she re-entered the room, her face had returned to its previous calm. Everything Rebecca did was actually partly out of a desire for revenge. She also wanted Juno to experience the feeling of having her family destroyed by others. She told her directly that she and her father had successfully destroyed Oliver's luxury car, making him believe that his mother had done it. That's why Oliver went with Dawson. Juno said nothing, directly throwing out the handcuff keys. Rebecca sneered and unlocked the handcuffs. "Maybe you should go save your crumbling empire. It doesn't matter now. I just need you." Then Juno began to imitate David's tactics, wanting to sow discord between David and Rebecca. She directly asked Rebecca, "Where is your home? Is it David's and his new wife's house? Is there a place for you there? And I have always treated you like my own daughter." These words seemed to affect Rebecca. A strange glint flashed in her eyes, but it quickly returned to coldness. However, Rebecca ultimately chose to leave with Juno. At this moment, FBI agents were on their way to the Caddis organization's office, so they needed to quickly leave South Korea. Then Rebecca got into Juno's car and went with everyone to Incheon to board a plane. David had no other choice but to run to his father-in-law for help. He asked him to find him some helpers along with all the equipment, including vehicles and weapons. His father-in-law immediately said cheerfully that he could help, but David also had to help him with something. David agreed without hesitation because now saving his daughter was the most important thing. Then, with his father-in-law's strong support, David obtained a lot of specialized equipment, and he also quickly organized an elite team and led the entire team rapidly towards the target. Not long after, FBI forces stormed the organization's office, controlling everyone and all documents inside. On another front, Juno's convoy quickly entered the ambush area that David had set up in advance. David cut the electrical box, causing all traffic lights on that road to stop working, and the intersection immediately became congested. Juno saw this and immediately ordered a turn and switched to another road. David sneered, announcing to Team 1 to begin the mission. Then a truck continued to block the road. Juno and her accomplices were forced to change direction again, entering a narrow construction road. By David's command, everyone began to act to blockade the area. Juno immediately guessed that David was behind it. She told her subordinates to find a way to break through the encirclement. David immediately led his men to chase after them. The two sides finally confronted each other directly. In just a moment, Juno lost one car, and soon after, the second car was blocked by a large industrial vehicle. Seeing no other way, Juno could only order her subordinates to fight with all their might. Gunn then voluntarily got out of the car to find a way. David saw this and quickly chased after him. Just as Gunn left, Rebecca unexpectedly attacked from behind. Then she violently beat Juno. Clearly, it was all an act before. Rebecca still harbored hatred for her. On another front, David and Gunn confronted each other directly for the third time. Unfortunately, David's gun suddenly jammed. The two could only fight hand-to-hand once again. Initially, David was continuously forced back by Gunn, but he quickly found an opportunity to counterattack. David used a chain to severely beat Gunn, then pinned him to the ground and continued to beat him. But even at this point, Gunn still refused to give up resisting. David had no choice but to use a knife to send him to the next world. Finally, David quickly returned to his daughter. At this moment, Rebecca had Juno under control, but when she saw her father about to open fire, she suddenly pleaded, saying that she didn't want her to die. Juno is an indispensable part of her. And finally, out of consideration for his daughter, David slowly lowered his gun. Then David drove his daughter home, while Juno boarded a plane to a country with no extradition treaty with the US. Although the organization had collapsed, Juno was not despairing. She could still create a new organization. Then David reunited with Rebecca, Yunju, and his younger daughter. Initially, they thought this would be the start of a happy life, but unexpectedly, the result was completely opposite. In the evening, the whole family went to a restaurant for dinner. Yunju and Rebecca went to the restroom together but never returned. David felt something was wrong and hurriedly went to check the situation, only to find his wife with a deep cut on her neck, bleeding profusely. But Rebecca was nowhere to be seen. David was immediately heartbroken. He held the bleeding wound while asking his wife if Rebecca had done it, but by then Yunju could no longer speak. David angrily shouted Rebecca's name. The story temporarily ends here. What happened seems to be an increasingly tangled mess, and the screenwriter has dug many unanswered questions. Yunju's death is definitely a big twist. Rebecca has disappeared. Did she really kill Yunju, or was she framed by someone else? If she killed her, it might be that she completely hated her father's new life. Or perhaps Juno had whispered something into her ear that made her feel that only by destroying everything her father had could she find liberation. If she was framed, then it was probably set up by Juno. She had fled but hadn't gone far, wanting David and his daughter to completely confront each other to benefit from the middle. And David, after losing Yunju, will surely frantically search for Rebecca. But when he finds her, will he seek revenge or try to bring his daughter back again? In short, if there is a second season, the plot could intensify even more, and the trust between the father and daughter will completely break down. This will stir things up from the shadows, and everyone will have to choose between hatred and survival. That's all for today's film. Thank you all for watching my video. Goodbye and see you again.